Episode 21, The Aftermath of the Kiss. The air had briefly been filled with excitement and anticipation. Now it felt like an empty, hopeless wilderness. Brad simply turned and walked away. He showed no emotion, as if nothing had happened. Tyler's shoulders sagged. He wanted to cry in sheer frustration, but no tears would come. He felt like he had been lifted up with hope and promise, only to find nothing but despair and emptiness. "Why are you doing this to me?" he thought. He almost dropped to his knees. Despite his anguish, he was not the type to just fall apart like that. He needed to do something to try and get a reaction out of Brad. "Hey, Brad, wait right there." Tyler's voice was not as controlled as it usually was. He just couldn't accept that Haley had had no effect on Brad. Besides, the long silence that followed the kiss surely signified that it had meant something. He caught up with Brad and put an arm on his shoulders. "Come on, how was it?" he asked as he grinned at him. "That was unexpected. You must have felt something." But Tyler just succeeded in annoying Brad. He stopped and looked at him coldly, then glanced at Tyler's arm on his shoulder, silently telling him to remove it if he wanted to keep it. Reading the signs, Tyler quickly removed his arm. "Oh, come on, Brad. Just tell me, okay? Don't be shy. I know you felt something. You must have. I'm sure of it. I'm right, aren't I?" he badgered. But all Brad heard was Tyler's irritating voice and his maddening words. This, combined with his annoying grin, sent him into a rage, and he could barely think straight. "Look," Tyler reasoned, "you were obviously taken by surprise, but I saw you with my own two eyes and heard that long, stunned silence afterward. Surely." But he was stopped by a single punch to the side of his head. "Ouch!" shrieked Tyler. Tyler's loud cry echoed through the mansion, and he collapsed on the floor, wailing dramatically like a small child. And now Brad was angered even more because of Tyler's infuriating play acting. He had barely touched him, and Brad knew it would take more than a weak slap to floor Tyler. Yet he was rolling around acting like he was in agony. "Stop faking and get up. We're going after her," said Brad. These words immediately silenced Tyler's cries of pain, and filled with excited anticipation, he scrambled to his feet. "What? Really? Why? Are you worried? Wait, do you miss her already? I mean, already. Are you serious?" Tyler wouldn't be quiet. "Shut up, or I'm leaving you here," Brad snapped. Yeah, okay, I'll stop now. Let's go," Tyler replied. Meanwhile, Haley was deep in thought in the back of a taxi heading to the market. She turned the earlier events over and over in her mind, biting her lip as she thought. The moment she had kissed him, she had been overcome by an unfamiliar heat that had run throughout her whole body, from the crown of her head to the tips of her toes. She hadn't expected such a reaction and had escaped from the room as quickly as possible. She was still dizzy, feeling a tingling sensation all over. Her thoughts were confused and disorganized, and she struggled to straighten them out. She didn't understand why or how she had reacted this way to a simple kiss. It hadn't even been a passionate kiss. It hadn't even been on the lips. She had just made the briefest contact with his skin, yet it resulted in such a violent reaction. But even thinking about it now made her a little lightheaded. God, what's happening to me? It was just a simple goodbye kiss, and I'm a wreck, she thought. Haley was having a hard time trying to calm herself down. She had succeeded in executing her plan, but she had miscalculated her own reaction. In fact, she hadn't even taken into consideration that she would react at all. She was supposed to act naturally, but instead, she had run away. The simple, cheesy kiss on the cheek move had been more of a kiss and run move. Although she was worried about Brad's reaction, she was also troubled by her own. "This is driving me crazy," she thought. "Miss, we're here," announced the taxi driver. His voice startled her and interrupted her thoughts. As soon as she stepped out of the car, she shook her head a couple times and started to walk toward the market. She tried to empty her mind of all her anxious thoughts and focus on the sounds, colors, and activity going on around her. Episode 23, Follow Your Dreams. Everyone had returned to Gray Mansion. The alluring aroma of a delicious homemade lasagna wafted through the house. Everyone could smell the mix of herbs and garlic and craved a taste. Everyone, of course, with the notable exception of the person for whom the meal had been specially prepared. Brad sat at the dining room table, wearing his usual dark attire and detached expression behind his mask. Haley wore a simple white dress and served him a plate of lasagna. She watched expectantly, waiting eagerly for a reaction. But, as expected, he just started eating quietly, providing no visible reaction at all. He glanced up and noticed her staring intently at him, and quickly realized she was waiting for some kind of feedback.
This is good,"
he said, adopting his customary blank tone before he continued eating. But Haley just rested her face in one hand and smiled. The result was exactly as she had expected, but oddly she didn't feel disappointed. Instead, she was just happy he was at least eating the food she had cooked for him. "Is it okay for you if—" she began nervously. Can I cook for you from now on?" she asked. Brad raised his head and looked at her with a puzzled expression.
"Why?"
This response unnerved her. Why? He's my husband. Do I need to have a reason to want to cook for my husband? What should I say? She thought. Because I'm your wife, and I don't have much else to do here anyway, she responded. Her reply was followed by a long silence. He examined her indifferent expression. No one else would have noticed the slight change in the look on her face, or the way her voice had wavered slightly when she had said she hadn't much to do.
"Are you getting bored here?"
he asked. Well, it's not... Haley couldn't get her words out. She was tongue-tied. She hadn't expected Brad to ask her that, and she hadn't expected him to see through so easily to the feelings she was trying hard to suppress. She had no choice but to admit it. Well, she began, it's not really like that. Maybe I'm just not used to staying inside the house all day long, especially when you're not around. But I'm sure I'll get used to it.
"What do you want to do?"
he asked. What? She wasn't sure what he meant. She didn't want to jump to conclusions, especially when it came to this unfathomable man. She knew she couldn't second-guess him. She stared at him, curious.
"You can still pursue your dreams if you wish,"
he said. At his words, she abruptly got to her feet. She wasn't sure she had heard correctly. She stared at him open-mouthed, her eyes full of disbelief. When she had signed the contract, she had agreed to give up her body and her future. She was aware that she no longer owned herself. She had buried all her dreams and desires in the hope that they would disappear in time. But what is he saying now? She thought, her head spinning. Brad continued to watch Haley's reaction carefully. He found it amusing that he had rendered her speechless. The thought crossed his mind that it wouldn't be a bad thing to surprise this woman once in a while. He broke the silence.
"As long as you don't break my rules, and as long as you prioritize your responsibility to me, you can do what you want."
There was another pause. Then Haley began to pace the room, pinching her own cheeks and shaking her head. After she had ensured that she wasn't dreaming, Haley turned to Brad with a beautiful, wide smile filled with happiness. Her eyes shone even brighter than usual, and Brad thought this was the most genuinely happy smile he had ever seen. He couldn't tear his eyes away from her at that moment. And he was surprised. He hadn't expected this reaction. He thought,
So, this is what she's like when she's truly happy.
"Thank you," she said as she reached out to take his long and elegant hand in hers. She caressed it gently, looking him in the eye, and said, "I swear my dreams will only ever take second place to you. You will always be my priority. I promise you." Brad was stunned. For a moment, he couldn't think straight. He hadn't expected to hear the words she had just said. And as if that hadn't been enough, without warning, Haley gently lifted his hand and with her eyes closed, kissed it as if she were a gentle fairy tale prince. And Brad was her adored princess. Brad still couldn't speak. And the moment her lips touched his hand, he might as well have been electrocuted for the jolt that went through his body. Inexplicably, his mind had gone blank, and he could think of nothing. Episode 24. Another Ghost. Meanwhile, Tyler was just outside the dining room, rolling on the floor right after taking a photo of that memorable, breathtaking moment. He gripped his cell phone and was desperately trying not to laugh out loud just in case he ruined the fairy tale. He could only imagine the level of shock Brad was suffering at that instant. Even Tyler was surprised by the scene he had just witnessed. Tyler thought, "My God, Haley, what the hell are you trying to do?" Tyler found the whole scene hilarious. Haley was the romantic prince, and Brad, of all people, the unsuspecting princess. Just as Haley was about to take her seat again, the sound of shattering glass broke the silence. Haley and Brad instantly turned their heads toward the center of the room where the sound had come from. A pale young man was standing near the window with the gray curtains dancing behind him. The sight of this beautiful, ethereal boy who looked as if he had just risen from the dead instantly transformed Haley. Previously relaxed and happy, she was now terrified. "Oh my God! A ghost!" Haley screamed the moment she saw him. She turned her head away instantly and froze. She had thought she was alone in the dining room with Brad. She had seen Tyler peeking around the corner of the door, but she hadn't seen anyone else until now. Her fear turned her icy cold, and her eyes fell on the masked man across from her. Then, without another word, she dropped to the floor and crawled under the table, straight toward Brad. The moment she had reached him, she clung to his leg. Brad frowned behind his mask. Feeling her trembling body, he felt an overwhelming urge to kill the people that had instilled this fear in her. Then he looked down at her, and his initial violent impulse was replaced with a desire to ease her fear.
"Don't worry. It's not a ghost. It's Leo,"
he said quietly as he caressed her head gently.
"Look."
Hearing Brad's words, Haley forced herself to come back to her senses. She knew she had overreacted, but she couldn't help it. Sometimes her body responded before her brain could process the reality, particularly when it came to her fear of ghosts. After a while, she raised her head without letting go of Brad's thigh, and she slowly peeked above the table. She spotted a handsome young man with a very apologetic look on his face. He was indeed the ghost she had just seen, but he was obviously not a real ghost. He was just a teenager. She remembered he had been the boy holding a bunch of red roses the day she had arrived at the house. His name was Leo. The young man walked toward her right away and started to speak. I am so sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. Really, I'm truly sorry." He apologized over and over, making Haley feel a little guilty. She then forced herself to calm down and put all thoughts of ghosts out of her mind. No, it's all right. It's my fault. I get scared too easily." She tried to laugh it off, but she was still clinging to Brad's thigh because she still felt frightened. Even though she could clearly see that the young man in front of her was human, made of flesh, she was still full of doubt. She knew he wasn't a ghost, but that didn't explain how he had gotten inside the room. It was impossible for anyone to come in without being seen because the only entrance was the door right in front of her. She hadn't felt his presence at all.
"Do you want to make sure? Why don't you touch him?"
Brad's voice interrupted her thoughts, and she lifted her head abruptly. Her brows instantly furrowed as though she couldn't believe what he had just said. She felt another shiver go down her spine, but this time it was because Brad appeared to be able to read her mind. "Oh my God, he's not a monster. He knows what I'm thinking. He's a ghost," she thought. "Please," she said, "can you stop scaring me too?" This confused Brad.
"What did I do to scare her?"
"It's fine, Miss Haley," said Tyler as he appeared from behind the door. Once he reached the table, Haley suddenly jumped up and hid behind Tyler, tugging tightly at his shirt. Tyler was stunned, and the first thing he did was look at the masked man in front of him. Brad's aura instantly turned dark as he stood up. His line of sight seemed to be locked on Haley's hand on Tyler's hip. Tyler found this all quite amusing and had to cover his mouth to stifle a laugh. "I wonder what's going to happen next," he thought. "This is like a comedy of errors." When Brad noticed Tyler's mischievous expression, he realized the force of his own reaction and was himself a little surprised. He calmed himself down, but found he remained painfully distracted at the sight of his wife touching another man. He again cast a glare across to Tyler, who was still smiling at him mischievously, obviously delighting in Brad's troubled and conflicted reaction. Episode 25. No Ghosts in the House. Fearing that Brad was about to snap, Tyler decided to stop teasing him. Note to self, know when to stop, he thought, sensibly. "Look, Miss Haley," Tyler said. "Leo here isn't a ghost, okay? Does the handsome young man look like a ghost to you?" He continued to speak while pointing at Leo, who still looked apologetic. Haley thought, he's right. Leo is the kind of cute boy anyone would want to shower with hugs and kisses. But who said ghosts were all scary looking and disgusting? There are beautiful ghosts too, right? Not hiding her doubts anymore, Haley opened her mouth to speak. "But how did he get in? I'm sure he wasn't there before, and there's no way he could have come in without me noticing." Her words made Tyler take a deep breath, and he glared at Leo as if blaming him for everything that was happening. "I see. So that's why you reacted the way you did. Well, actually, this kid here is a rare breed. Have you heard about those people who are just not noticeable?"
Well, I don't really know if it's because they have a very weak aura or something like this, but this kid has a very weak presence. He just blends in wherever he goes, said Tyler. Then Tyler looked at Leo. The truth is, even I get freaked out by him from time to time. Sometimes he just sneaks up on you. Then he turned back to Haley. I only notice him once he talks or makes an obvious move. It's just the way he is. Does that make sense? Are you convinced? As she listened to Tyler's long explanation, her fear began to fade. She remembered what she had once read in an article about what the author called the gray men, which was someone who didn't want to draw attention to themselves. The gray man. So they did their best to blend in so no one really noticed them. She didn't know if this is what Tyler meant, but she felt as though his explanation had made sense. She then slowly raised her head and looked at Leo. Please, let me apologize in advance for what I'm going to do, she said. Then she slowly reached her hand and began to poke the boy's cheek with her finger, carefully and gently, but tentatively, as though she might run away at any moment. But by the time she had started pinching him, she was finally convinced. Oh, you really are human. I'm sorry. I obviously overreacted, she smiled. Leo had instantly turned red because he thought Haley pinching his cheeks as if he was a cute toddler was some kind of embarrassing punishment for him scaring her so much. This scene, however, was making her husband, the Iceman, even more frosty. And the boss here? How should I put this? Tyler gestured toward Brad and paused. You know he always seems so scary, right? Well, you don't need to be scared of him. Tyler had wanted to quickly reassure Haley after her earlier outburst, and because he could tell Brad's mood was becoming increasingly darker as he watched his wife touch another man. Thankfully, Haley stopped pinching Leo's cheeks and turned her head. She stared at the masked man, fidgeting. It's not that, she said. Tyler frowned and he looked over at Brad. Then what is it? What did you do, boss? He asked Brad. But Brad just replied in his usual monotonous tone. I didn't do anything. Upon hearing this answer, Tyler turned his head back toward Haley. Wait, don't tell me it's because of what he said, he asked. When Haley nodded, he scratched his head. Did you think he could read your mind? Or hear your thoughts? He asked again, and again, she nodded. I think you should explain yourself, Tyler laughed as he turned toward Brad. But Brad stayed silent, and his silence strangely made her feel guilty. She didn't know why, but she had felt sad the moment she thought he might be a ghost. First, she knew it was an irrational thought, but deep inside, she realized she didn't want to be afraid of him at all. And she was sorry she had ever thought this. She took a deep breath and then took a step closer to him, still fidgeting nervously. Look, I'm sorry. I think I just got carried away because of my ridiculous phobia. I think I'm overthinking things way too much, she said apologetically. When he heard her heartfelt apology, Brad's anger instantly disappeared. No, it's fine. I know you're afraid of ghosts. It's not a problem, he reassured her. Then he patted her on the head before turning and walking away as if nothing had happened. Haley was already asleep when Brad walked into their bedroom. He stood beside the bed and watched her sleeping peacefully for a while. After a few minutes, he finally lay down on the bed. Just as he was about to close his eyes, he felt her arms wrap around him and hug him tightly. I'm sorry, she said. Brad was completely taken aback. Is she still awake? Why is she sorry? He wondered. He was about to respond, but then he heard her gentle snore. Is she talking in her sleep? He mused. He carefully placed his hand on her head and gently stroked her hair. Episode 26. Rise and Shine. Brad was still asleep at dawn. It was the first time he had ever slept so long. He had always liked to rise before the sunrise, but that day, he would miss it. As he woke up, he lifted the mask covering his eyes. The bright sunshine radiating through the window surprised him. What time is it? He thought in confusion. He was about to sit up when he felt a weight on his arm. Realizing that his wife was still sleeping, he removed the mask he had been sleeping in. He reached out his hand, grabbing the mask he would wear for the day. He gently lifted his arm and tried to move Haley's head onto the pillow. The commotion made her open her eyes. Good morning, she said with a smile. Brad nodded in silence. After a brief moment, he removed his arm from under his wife and jumped out of bed. Haley yawned and sat up, stretching her arms high into the air. The moment Brad stepped out of the bedroom, a large face appeared in front of him. Morning. What did you get up to last night? Tyler asked in anticipation. You never sleep so late.
He smiled slyly.
Wait a minute. Don't tell me. You guys did it, didn't you?
His eyes were almost bulging out of his head. He was standing too close. Brad raised his hand up, placed it on Tyler's face, and pushed him away. Brad walked right past his friend and headed toward his study. He disregarded the man's questions. It was as if he didn't hear him at all.
Hey, don't ignore me, Tyler called out. Wait, I get it. No response means yes, right?
He rubbed his hands together and grinned.
Way to go, Brad. Am I going to be an uncle soon?
Tyler was silenced by the sound of the door slamming shut. His mischievous smirk didn't fade, though. Regardless of whether or not anything had happened the previous night, he enjoyed teasing his friend. He had to take advantage of these rare moments when Brad was acting like a real human being. Soon he would change into his usual monstrous self, and the fun would be over. A few minutes later, Brad emerged from his study. He was fully dressed, wearing a black silk suit, white shirt, and red tie. Haley, who had come to call him for breakfast, stood speechless. He looked so suave, like a movie star who was about to walk down the red carpet. She was flustered by Brad's striking appearance, and she stared at him in awe. After a few seconds of silence, she finally managed to squeak out a few words. "Breakfast is ready." Brad was about to answer her when Tyler interrupted.
You go on ahead. We'll be there soon.
Haley nodded at Tyler and took one last glance at her handsome husband before quietly walking away. Tyler sidled up to the masked man only after she had gone out of sight.
You're not thinking about leaving without eating breakfast, are you? He asked. You can't leave your wife to eat all by herself, sitting alone at that long table, no one to talk to.
He was trying to convince his friend to enjoy some food before starting his day.
Have a heart, Brad. Don't be so cold.
Tyler's tragic speech was cut short. Brad had brushed past him and was walking toward the dining room. Tyler's heart skipped a beat. When Tyler saw Brad come out of the study in his suit, he knew the man well enough to know that he was planning to leave right away. He had prepared himself to try and coax Brad into staying and eating breakfast with Haley first. But this hadn't been Tyler's only motive for trying to stay. Haley had made his favorite dish for breakfast. The previous day, she had prepared a fabulous dinner. After just one bite, Tyler had immediately fallen in love with her cooking. He and Leo had devoured all the leftovers the moment Brad left. They were both thankful that Brad didn't possess the appetite of an average man. Episode 27, Eat and Run. After breakfast, Brad immediately got up and headed for the door. Haley chased after him, trying to match his pace. "When will you be back?" she asked. He replied with just one word. "Tomorrow." She was relieved that he wouldn't be gone for too long. She was afraid that the intimacy that had been growing between them would fade if he disappeared again. Whenever Brad came home, he was cold and distant. It always took some time to get him to lighten up and relax. She didn't want to have to start from scratch again. "Tomorrow, okay." She nodded and smiled, as if his single-word response filled her with immense joy. Brad admired her bright eyes and dazzling face. He wondered if it was because she had such a good sleep the previous night. Maybe she was the reason he had also slept for so long. He couldn't remember the last time he had stayed in bed so late. He paused and turned to face her. She looked up at him curiously. "About what I said yesterday," he explained. "I meant it. You're free to go and do whatever you like." Brad's words caused Haley to pause. She blinked 3 times before another bright smile broke out on her pretty face. "I'll do my best," she exclaimed in a tone filled with energy and determination. "Good," Brad replied. He placed his hand affectionately on top of Haley's head for a fleeting moment. Then he turned to leave. As he walked away, Haley subconsciously raised her hand and played with her hair where he had just touched her. She seemed to be lost in thought for a moment. Every time Brad acted this way, she felt as though he was becoming a warmer, a more affectionate person. The touch of his hand made her forget about his stern voice, mysterious aura, and all the times they had spent together filled with deafening silence. The moment of intimacy had energized her, and she had an idea. Just before Brad stepped outside, he heard light footsteps rapidly approaching from behind. He turned his head. To his surprise, Haley suddenly grabbed his hand, pulled him toward her, and then stood on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek. As fast as she had come, she turned around and ran away. Brad stood there motionless as he watched Haley disappear. He wondered why she always ran away every time she kissed him. The moment Brad entered the car, he heard Tyler's annoying voice. "Couldn't leave without a little goodbye kiss, huh? How sweet." Tyler took the opportunity to tease Brad a little more. He was about to continue when Brad interrupted him.
"We're late. Get going,"
he said resolutely. Tyler dutifully shut his mouth and focused on driving. But it didn't take long before he started to talk again.
"I wonder how angry the old man's going to be when we arrive."
Brad had removed his mask. His pale face showed signs of weariness. He knew they were headed into a lion's den.
"He's not going to be happy,"
he answered while focusing on his laptop.
"Not happy?"
Tyler swallowed hard.
"He's going to be absolutely furious. How about you go in alone?"
His voice raised in volume. It was as if he was getting more nervous the closer they got to their destination. Brad's silence gave Tyler his answer. But he had already knew he would never let Brad go in by himself. Brad was ignoring Tyler's anxious behavior. It was mostly an act. Tyler was gritting his teeth and his hands were wrapped tightly around the steering wheel. He had always had a flair for dramatics. The car soon drove through a huge gate. Countless shipping containers surrounded them as far as the eye could see. Not far away, the tops of huge cargo ships were towering. As Tyler drove through the huge port, he started talking again.
"Isn't this your fault?"
he asked. Even though Brad was ignoring him, Tyler continued.
"If only you had woken up early as usual, then we wouldn't have..."
His voice trailed off as he thought of something.
"Never mind. If you hadn't slept in, we wouldn't have been able to enjoy that delicious breakfast."
He was rambling again.
"Your wife really is a great cook. I can't wait until..." "Shut up,"
Brad said abruptly. Episode 28, Back to School. Haley's mind was racing as she walked around Greenport. She was thinking about her second kiss and run. The truth was that she had never meant to do that again. She really had just wanted to give him a normal kiss on the lips. However, she remembered step 7 from her notebook. Make him think about you. Make him curious about the things you do. Surprise him. Haley decided she would turn the kiss and run into a double-edged sword. If she surprised Brad with a kiss, it would definitely arouse his curiosity. It might even make him think about her afterward. Haley hoped this would work. But if she didn't get a reaction from Brad after the third try, she would have to think of something else. She would follow Amy's advice to experiment and see what was working and what wasn't. Amy had been clear not to overdo, though. After about an hour, Haley finally reached her destination. Standing in front of a large gate, she raised her head and stared at the building across the baseball diamond. While looking at the school, she remembered something. It was so vivid it seemed like it had just happened. Listen to me, Haley. You're one of a kind. You're the most exceptional student I have ever had the privilege of teaching. Please don't waste your talents. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Those words had been spoken to her by her teacher, Miss Lee. She had been an exceptionally good teacher who had always motivated Haley to do her absolute best. Miss Lee had even helped Haley collect scholarship applications for some of the best universities in the country. She had been confident Haley could get into any school she applied to. Back then, Haley's mind had been on other things. After she had graduated from high school, she had immediately gone out to look for a job. Her brother's health had been deteriorating, and she had to start work right away to help pay for his medical bills. As time went by, Haley had almost completely forgotten about university. Her own dreams had to be sacrificed in order to save her brother. No matter how hard she had worked, she had still secretly held onto the desire of one day returning to school. That had all changed the day she met Tyler. When Haley had signed that contract and gave herself to a stranger, she had known her days of dreaming were finished. She would need to devote herself to being the best wife possible. But when she had finally met Brad and he had encouraged her to pursue her ambitions, Haley hadn't been able to believe it. Perhaps he had just said that to make her happy. Whether he had meant what he said or not, Haley was not going to let this second chance slip through her fingers. She was determined to make something of herself. Let's do this, she proclaimed with confidence. She raised her fist in the air as she walked through the school's doors. She was fearless. A few minutes later, she met Miss Lee. They embraced each other like family. After chatting for a long time, Miss Lee expressed her disappointment that she hadn't seen Haley's name on the previous year's SAT scores. She told Haley she had never given up hope. I'm really glad that you finally realized that life without a purpose is meaningless, Miss Lee explained. Even if life breaks you into pieces, you need to put yourself back together and keep going. Never give up. Believe in yourself, just as I believe in you. Miss Lee's words were an inspiration. She truly was the best teacher, and Haley embraced her once more. I'll do my best, she promised. Miss Lee arranged for Haley to take the entrance exams for some of the top universities. She had 1 month to prepare. Haley told her teacher that she wanted to get a full scholarship, so she was going to have to work hard. The next day, Brad arrived home to find his wife was not there. Fred had informed him that Haley had gone to Greenport early that morning. Not asking for any more details, Brad went over to the couch and sat down. He saw a pile of thick books under the table. On the top was a textbook entitled Medical Microbiology. He had a fairly good idea of what Haley was up to. Brad headed to the kitchen to get a glass of water. As he walked toward the cabinet, something caught his eye. He moved to get a closer look. Even though Haley wasn't at home, she hadn't forgotten about her mission. She knew she had to keep executing the steps in her notebook. Even if they couldn't see each other, there were still ways she could show her affection. Earlier that morning, she had read step 10, make a romantic gesture. One of the suggestions in her notebook was to write a love letter. Haley came up with a great idea. She would prepare some food for Brad and leave a note with it. Haley had woken up incredibly early to prepare Brad's surprise before she had left for the day. After she had finished, she placed it in the fridge and had stuck a little note on the door. Brad read the note. I made this for you. I hope you like it. Under the message, Haley had signed her name and drawn a little heart. Episode 29. Special Treat. The moment Brad opened the fridge, he saw a heart-shaped chocolate cake. There was a red cherry on the top. It was obvious she had spent a lot of time and effort making this for him. Brad was reluctant to eat such a thoughtful gift. Brad read the note a second time. He picked up the cake and moved over to the table. After he sat down, he stared at the cake for a long time. He read over the note a few more times. If you're not gonna eat it, I will. Tyler's loud voice broke Brad's concentration. Your wife has written you such a lovely note. That's more than enough for you, right? Besides, you're not that fond of eating anyway. Tyler's gaze was focused on the cake in front of Brad. He licked his lips. His mouth was salivating. Brad glared at him coldly. He picked up a spoon and started eating the cake, ignoring his friend. Just as he was about to devour the last spoonful, Tyler cried out, Hey, don't be so greedy. Save some for me, he pleaded. But Brad didn't even look up. Tyler tugged at his hair in frustration. However, what Tyler heard next gave him hope. A voice called out, Mr. Clark, there's actually some more cake here. Tyler turned around with excitement. A young man, the same age as Leo, was standing in the doorway. This one is not as pretty as the other one, but it's still very delicious, the boy explained. I think Miss Moore had some leftover batter after she made that cute heart cake. There's still half of it left. This was Leo's twin brother, Jared. The two boys were almost identical. The only difference was their hair. Leo had silky black hair, but his brother's hair was messy and blonde. More cake? Tyler exclaimed. Why didn't you say something sooner? Bring it over here right now. I don't care if it's shaped like a heart or not. His voice was filled with an array of different emotions. It was hard to tell if he was happy or angry. One thing was certain, he was impatient and hungry. He reached out desperately for the cake. As soon as Jared gave the cake to Tyler, his face lit up. He ate it ravenously. It was just as delicious as he had imagined. A few moments later, Tyler finally raised his head and looked at Jared. When did you get here? Last night, Jared replied. Then he turned toward Brad. Excuse me, Mr. Lopez. Can I guard Miss Moore as well? I'm sure if she's stuck with Leo all day, she'll be bored to death. Hold on, Tyler interjected, not allowing Brad the opportunity to respond. Haley isn't supposed to know she's being guarded. Jared suddenly understood why his brother had been chosen for the job. Leo had always been the more subtle of the two. I see. That's why you chose Leo. Jared nodded. He's the perfect man for the job. Episode 30. Second Surprise. Brad was quietly standing near the large window in the study. He gazed out to the garden below. So? He asked coldly. Jared had already gotten used to Brad's uncompassionate demeanor, and he had been surprised to see his boss eating a heart-shaped cake moments before. Brad had almost seemed lighthearted as he read the love note from his new wife. If Jared hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he never would have believed it. Good thing I was the one sent there, Jared explained. I witnessed a fascinating development. It was quite lucky. Jared cleared his throat before continuing. There's been a huge breakthrough with Martin's team. They're waiting for you to decide. Do you want me to request the data? Brad's eyes narrowed. He didn't seem pleased.
No, tell them to wait for me, he replied. His tone was so cold, and it sent shivers down Jared's spine. So what's your plan? Tyler asked. How long will you leave her for this time? Brad turned his gaze from the window. He seemed to relax a bit. She's here. Tyler watched the black car enter the garage. As soon as Haley stepped out of the car, she took a deep breath and smiled. She had another little surprise planned for her husband. Her slender legs moved gracefully as she walked slowly toward the door. She was dressed in a white cotton blouse and plaid skirt. Her black hair was tied back in a long braid, accentuating her delicate face and making her natural beauty hard to ignore. She carried a bag of books in one hand. Her other hand was behind her back, hiding something. Haley approached the couch. She was ready to initiate step 10 of her plan. Make a romantic gesture, she reminded herself. She saw the silhouette of a man sitting on the couch. He seemed to be waiting for her. A smile brightened her face as she moved closer. Hearing her footsteps, Brad raised his head. He watched her approach until she stood right in front of him. I'm back, she said with her usual energetic tone. He nodded. Was his only reply. She wasted no time. She put down her books and stood up straight in front of him. Both her hands were now hiding behind her back. He could tell that she was about to give him something, and he watched her curiously, his eyes filled with anticipation. Haley stretched out her hand, offering him a single red rose. For you, she said coyly. He gazed at the rose and then at his beautiful wife. He hadn't expected such a romantic gesture. Shouldn't I be the one to give her a rose? He thought. Her eyes twinkled like starlight. She seemed incredibly pleased with herself. Brad doubted he could make her this happy even if he had given her dozens of roses. It wasn't the rose that made this moment special. It wasn't the rose that made this moment so special. It was her, the way she looked, and her modest expression. The way she had smiled when she had handed the rose to him. She was normally a bright and determined woman, but in that moment, she was truly dazzling. He finally raised his arm and took the rose from her hand. The moment he held it, her sparkling eyes filled with tears of happiness. He was amused by her reaction. It seemed disproportionate to his actions. She quickly turned and picked up her bag. I'll go tidy this up, she said, smiling from ear to ear. He was left silently scrutinizing the rose in his hand, dissecting it with his razor-sharp stare. Episode 30, Second Surprise. Brad was quietly standing near the large window in the study. He gazed out to the garden below. So? He asked coldly. Jared had already gotten used to Brad's uncompassionate demeanor, and he had been surprised to see his boss eating a heart-shaped cake moments before. Brad had almost seemed lighthearted as he read the love note from his new wife. If Jared hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he never would have believed it. Good thing I was the one sent there, Jared explained. I witnessed a fascinating development. It was quite lucky. Jared cleared his throat before continuing. There's been a huge breakthrough with Martin's team. They're waiting for you to decide. Do you want me to request the data? Brad's eyes narrowed. He didn't seem pleased. No, tell them to wait for me, he replied. His tone was so cold, and it sent shivers down Jared's spine. So what's your plan? Tyler asked. How long will you leave her for this time? Brad turned his gaze from the window. He seemed to relax a bit. She's here. Tyler watched the black car enter the garage. As soon as Haley stepped out of the car, she took a deep breath and smiled. She had another little surprise planned for her husband. Her slender legs moved gracefully as she walked slowly toward the door. She was dressed in a white cotton blouse and plaid skirt. Her black hair was tied back in a long braid, accentuating her delicate face and making her natural beauty hard to ignore. She carried a bag of books in one hand. Her other hand was behind her back, hiding something. Haley approached the couch. She was ready to initiate step 10 of her plan. Make a romantic gesture, she reminded herself. She saw the silhouette of a man sitting on the couch. He seemed to be waiting for her. A smile brightened her face as she moved closer. Hearing her footsteps, Brad raised his head. He watched her approach until she stood right in front of him. I'm back, she said with her usual energetic tone. He nodded. Was his only reply. She wasted no time. She put down her books and stood up straight in front of him. Both her hands were now hiding behind her back. He could tell that she was about to give him something, and he watched her curiously, his eyes filled with anticipation. Haley stretched out her hand, offering him a single red rose. For you, she said coyly. He gazed at the rose and then at his beautiful wife. He hadn't expected such a romantic gesture. Shouldn't I be the one to give her a rose? He thought. Her eyes twinkled like starlight. She seemed incredibly pleased with herself.
Brad doubted he could make her this happy even if he had given her dozens of roses. It wasn't the rose that made this moment special. It wasn't the rose that made this moment so special. It was her, the way she looked, and her modest expression. The way she had smiled when she had handed the rose to him. She was normally a bright and determined woman, but in that moment, she was truly dazzling. He finally raised his arm and took the rose from her hand. The moment he held it, her sparkling eyes filled with tears of happiness. He was amused by her reaction. It seemed disproportionate to his actions. She quickly turned and picked up her bag. "I'll go tidy this up," she said, smiling from ear to ear. He was left silently scrutinizing the rose in his hand, dissecting it with his razor-sharp stare. Episode 31. What's Mine is Yours. Her eyes were instantly drawn to the rose placed in a black vase on top of the table. It looked so beautiful. The contrast of the vibrant red rose against the glossy black glass was pleasant. Haley smiled, feeling extremely proud of herself. She walked toward the table, still staring at the rose. Brad just sat there, quietly watching her. "It's pretty," she said. Brad acknowledged her with a single nod. "I'm glad you like it. I was actually a bit nervous just now. I was afraid you might have thrown it away." Haley's remark was accompanied by a soft chuckle. She was trying to be funny. "I would never do that," he said. His voice was serious and firm. Haley didn't know how to respond. "I guess he can't take a joke," she thought. She coughed to clear her throat, trying to think of what to say next. "Thanks, but is this okay with you?" she asked. "I mean, putting a flower here?" Brad looked intrigued. "Is there a problem with where it is?" "Oh no, not at all," she replied. I just thought maybe you didn't like colorful things around the house." Haley was having trouble expressing herself and spoke hesitantly. There was a long silence. Haley just looked at Brad, waiting anxiously for some sort of response. He finally opened his mouth. "As long as you like it, it's fine with me." Haley blinked in shock. She wasn't expecting him to say something so nice. What's going on? She wondered. It was the first time she had heard him speak like this. It almost sounded like he was trying to be romantic. He was normally so cold and distant. "Your personal study is finished being set up," he said as he stood up. Haley was confused. "My personal study? What do you mean?" Haley's eyes were wide as she followed Brad toward the door next to his private room. He opened the door to reveal a spacious room. It looked very comfortable. Everything she needed was already there. A computer was set up on a desk, and the bookshelves were arranged with an assortment of books. She looked at Brad with a bewildered expression. "When did you—" she tried to ask. Before she could finish, he replied, "A few hours ago." At first, Haley couldn't believe it. But after thinking about it, she soon realized that this wouldn't have been that difficult for a hardworking, secretive man like Brad to arrange. She was so touched that she almost wanted to cry. "Thank you," she uttered sincerely. Brad looked at her. "Since you've become my wife, you haven't asked me for anything. I noticed that you haven't even used the credit card I gave you." Haley was speechless. For some reason, Brad's tone almost sounded sad. She didn't know how to respond. She wanted to tell him that she needed nothing. Her brother's safety was her main concern. She wanted to tell him that his kindness to her was more than enough. However, she couldn't find the words to express herself. Brad noticed that she was unusually quiet, so he placed his hand gently on her head. "If you want anything, just tell me." Even though he still sounded quite serious, Haley was touched by his generous offer. Haley stayed in her new study all night.